here in Mumbai now.
Okay. Joseph Campbell once said, myths are private dreams, and myths are public dreams, and dreams are private myths. Good morning, all the literature lovers. Welcome to the fifth episode of Books and Bliss Club chat show. Today we have one special author with us. The today's show is Mythology Walk and Talk Show. Today we have someone who is corporate professional turned mythologist. He is author of three mythological fiction. He is professor at Mumbai University in comparative mythology. He is qualified in Indian and world mythology from Mumbai University. I welcome Mr. Utkarsh Patel to Books and Bliss Club chat show. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me here today.
Thank you for giving your valuable time. So, sir, let's start the session.
Sure.
So, as I got to know that you were initially into the corporate profession. Initially, you were corporate professional, and then you last 6 or 7 years you completely gave up the job, and you are now into mythology. So, is there any particular incidents in your life which inspired you to dedicate most of your time to study, to teach, and even to write about mythology?
See, what is happening is I think the corporate world is getting kind of very hectic. And for me, at least, it was becoming very mundane, very stale, very routine. I was literally at one point of time living out of the bag, traveling, targets, training, selling, which I had been doing for close to 25 years. And beyond the point, what do you do? I mean, what innovation can you bring in sales, which you've been doing for 25 years? And I was not enjoying the work. So somewhere I tried to give up. Then my company wanted me to continue for some time. So, I became a consultant to the same company. So hoping that I would have less responsibility, but it didn't work because in sales, there is no 5-day week, you can, you might have to go on a Saturday, you might have to go on a Sunday. And in between, I had got interested in mythology because Mumbai University is one of its kind, has a course on comparative mythology. So I had just completed 2 years of that course, and I was finding it very, very interesting. And I realized that this corporate world is not something I want to continue. There is a lot more I thought I could do in this field. So at one point of time, with the support of family, of course, I decided to, say no and goodbye to it. So here I am thereafter.
So, sir, how was the transition? I mean, when you decided to left the job and the uncertainty or the unknown territory of mythology, which you were not aware of before studying the mythology. So, were you sure that this mythology is going to serve you for the rest of your life?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It isn't an easy transition. When you have, let's say, at the end of the day, when you have, give me a minute, please. Yeah, I think there's somebody trying to reach. When there is a comfort of a salary at the end of the month, nicely, quietly going to the bank, and you don't have to worry about EMIs, bills, credit cards, etc. That's a comfort. So from that to a certain period of uncertainty, definitely I cannot say it was a cakewalk. I cannot say, "Arey, koi problem nahi hua." It wasn't simple. But as I said to you, this kind of a decision should be taken with your family. You just can't leave it and say, "Okay, tomorrow onwards, I'm not going," because there are plans. You've made commitments. You have your long-term bills. You have your child's education, etc., etc. So I think what in my case, what we did was that before we took a decision of this nature, we ensured that for the next 3 years, even if we don't get into any extravagant expense, at least the basic expense should be taken care of. So with that kind of view, with that kind of understanding, which we entered into with as a family, we decided that I'll give myself 3 years. If in 3 years nothing happens, then I'll probably go back and start working again. But fortunately for me, before I quit my job, my first book uh, got selected for publishing. And while I was contemplating leaving it, I got commissioned for my second book. So these two things together kind of motivated me, saying, "Ho jayega, dekha jayega," And as I said, I haven't looked back. And after 3 years, I definitely didn't go back to selling software.
So सर ये जो बुक लिखने का
Sorry, I
था
can't
वो
hear.
कितना सॉरी हेलो
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how difficult it was for you to being a writer? I mean, you were corporate professional, and did you have any experience of writing any article or short story before? So, what was your what are the challenges you found while writing a book and even publishing it?
I'll be honest. What happened is I started. I started writing a blog. So what used to happen is, I always had this thing about telling stories, and I would tell people stories. कि, "अरे, पता है, इसके पीछे ये है. This is the story behind this," and everybody used to love to listen. And somebody suggested, "Why don't you write? ये हम चार लोग कब तक सुनते रहेंगे?" So I said, "Okay." So I started a blog, and that's when I started writing, and that's when a lot of people started appreciating. And I remember I had read an article, and I realized that this article made me read something else. And I got into a feeling that this can become a novel. So I just casually started writing. I won't say that it was a very planned thing about writing novels. Rather, I always thought that writing novel is not my cup of tea. I should stick to writing short stories. Not that I had written too many of them, I'll be honest with you. But the first novel, normally, a lot of people say, "Arey, I had to struggle. Uh, 20 publishers ने reject कर दिया मेरी किताब, तब जाके किसने लिया." Well, I wasn't so fortunate. I can't tell you such a lovely story. My book got selected by the very first this thing, and I was wondering if that's okay, because now I won't be able to tell you stories कि कितना struggle करना पड़ा मेरे को किताब छपवाने में. But no, they took it, and I was very happy at that. So that's how the first book started. And the first book did very well. And even before the first book was published, I was commissioned for a second one. So, teaching mythology and writing about mythology enabled me to sort of get into a constant mode of research. So that helped. So I was always having ideas, ki, chalo, I'm going to work on this, then I'm going to work on this. And that went on for it's still on. So I come up with new ideas every alternate day, saying, "I think I should write on this." Yeah.
So just like you, many corporate professionals who are finding their passion, something like what you have found, and they are not sure for which activity they can spend their rest of life. So can you just give some tips or certain hints that these are the things which you should keep in your mind when you leave your job, as well as the waiting period between getting your first income out of that passion?
See, there are two ways to look at it. If you are if you think that you're going to get the same kind of a lifestyle, okay, that you had during your corporate life and writing life, that's not going to happen. Let me disappoint you right now rather than you getting disappointed later on. It is not possible, right? Because writing a book is not profitable for everybody, right? Not everybody can become a Chetan Bhagat, with his book, where he's signing books and then somebody's buying his movie rights. No, not everybody. And if you do reach that stage, consider yourself lucky. But to remain there for so long also is tough, because the market has opened up. Lot of authors are writing. Rather, today when I think of a topic, the first thing I go to Amazon and Flipkart to see, is topic पे किसी ने किताब लिखा है क्या? Because then the publisher is not interested in saying, "अरे नहीं नहीं उत्कर्ष sir, ये तो already 2 books are out." It's not important how good or bad those books are, but then the publisher is not interested. At the same time, there are too many publishers also. So it might be easy. Writing a book, I think today, and getting it published is not very tough. What is tough is to sell those books. What is tough is to reach those books in 1,000 hands in 2 months. Because if that's not happening, then frankly, the publisher will either not republish that book, or the next publisher will think before taking, because as I told you, there are too many people writing books, too many publishers. Then there is this whole new avenue of self-publication. So even if no publisher is willing to print my book, I'll do it myself. So where is the, and the readership is also falling. Let's face it, our children are not reading books anymore. They are all playing with mobile phones and tabs and gadgets. So पढ़ कौन रहा है, वो भी आपको देखना पड़ेगा. So two things. You will have to compromise on your lifestyle. That's number one. Number two, I personally feel, which is what I did, and probably that helped me, is keep a sum of money for a long period of time. For example, EMIs, okay, some child education. If that's coming up, make sure that kind of a cushion exists. If that cushion doesn't exist, then you will get frustrated very fast, because this area of writing books and getting published and making money is a huge thing, and it's not the same thing. Writing books, very good. Publication, okay. But making money out of it is not easy. Right? That's something you must understand, because royalties come much later. Right? And the word royalty, when you start writing books, you realize that royalty is such a misnomer. Usko pata nahi kyun log royalty bolte hain. I would call it poverty, because wo jo check aata hai, wo sometimes kisi ko batane layak rehta nahi hai. So let's not talk about that. So I feel that, and also remember the fact that the one who writes nowadays will also have to do his own marketing. So authors will have to get into 100 forums, get into different social media. You must have time for all this. Don't expect, I'm not saying you see the best of the authors these days. They make videos, they are in lit fests, they are in book clubs, 100 places. You have to be there, and you'll have to find time for that. It's tough, but it's fun. I say that it's satisfying. I'm not regretting it. I'm not saying my 6 years have been cakewalk, but I've enjoyed it. Also, I'm not into only writing books. So maybe that holds me in a good position, that I'm writing. I'm also into speaking engagements, and I'm also into teaching at a number of places. So just writing books, I've seen a lot of people who've gone back to work. So if you can do 2-3 things, like I know certain authors have gone into script writing now. Right? So only writing books is not easy. So you can branch out into something else also. I think it helps. That helps.
That was really useful hints by you, sir. Sir, one more thing. Before 6 years, when you were not into mythology, what was your perception of God, and what is the perception of God after getting into the mythology? Did mythology denies the God, or it supported the God?
Mythology per se has, let me make this statement, mythology has nothing to do with God. Let's make that first. Mythology is an answer to what the original man, the primeval man, the first man, जिसको हम लोग बोलते हैं Adi Purush, what the Adi Purush was looking for, Adi Purush was looking for answers. See, today why the sun rises in one place and travels half the day and sets at the other place. Today you know what is an eclipse. Today you know what is a volcano. But the Adi Purush did not know any of these. He did not know what is this yellow structure which rises from the east, and all that. He didn't understand. And then why in the middle of the day one is sweating, and towards the end evening it just goes. So he's trying to understand, and then he creates that there's a sun god, who uses a chariot and rises from one side and goes to the other. But then he also understood that this doesn't happen every time. So Raat ko kahan gaya? So then Raat ko, what is that white stuff that comes out? Now that's the moon. So he invents another story and he calls it Chandra. Right? So this, and then why does it suddenly rain? Why does it suddenly thunder? Today, if it's thundering, you're not scared. You're nicely sitting at home. You're not worried. But early man who was staying in the cave, he was scared. He didn't know what thunder meant, because that sound was deafening. He used to think, so he invented, or he felt that the gods are angry. And that is why the gods are punishing. So he started sacrificing, offering sacrifices, started doing rituals. You see, this is how gods got created. This is how man discovered or invented gods so that he can be taken care of. And at every stage, he started worshipping, appeasing, making rituals to make sure that these gods are, not troubling them. That's the concept of God as in mythology. So remember, God and mythology, rather, mythology came first. This established religion that we see today, as in religion which says, ye mat karo, wo mat karo, this is how you should do, that is how you should do, ye puja ki, ye vidhi hai, wo, that came much later. Why?
Okay.
Because religion is the creation of a learned man. Mythology was the creation of the primeval man when he's trying to
Okay.
grow answer. And that's why in mythology classes we often say that mythology was also early man's science. Today eclipse kyun hota hai, but if you go through our mythology, then we believe that the sun was eclipsed by Rahu, okay, and Ketu. But after some time,
Mm.
because his head was cut off, it comes
Yes.
out that the sun is. So today you have all these logic. Today science has answered, but earlier mythology had answers for all this. So according to the Greek mythology, when their blacksmith god Hephaestus is working underground, and when he's creating weapons, in his underground workshop, the fire that comes out from the volcano is actually the blacksmith working. But today we know what it is, right? So there are
Mm.
different myths across the world. So religion came much later, and the concept of God that we have today, God being very powerful, omnipresent, omniscient,
Mm.
is a much later thought. Mythology never quite went for all that. Mythology answered a few questions in the process of storytelling. So it is through storytelling that mythology gave us. So you have a sun god, you have a thunder god, you have gods of rivers, you have gods of mountains, you have gods of forests, etc., etc. So belief in God has nothing to do with mythology. Mythology is answers to questions that the early man was looking for.
Such a lucid explanation and such a fascinating story. I mean, if we even being a learned man in today's era, according to your explanation, if I go forward, I think if we conceive our mind to similar to the primeval man, then I think it becomes really easy to find or discover many things even today.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And you will see that across the world, whichever mythology you are studying, whichever, has a similar mindset. It doesn't matter that, you study Indian mythology or you study Greek or you study the lesser known mythology of, let's say, the North American Indians, or you study the Aztec and the Mayans or the indigenous Chinese. You will find this basic quest to know, to understand nature was always there in all the cultures. And that's the beauty of mythology.
Uh, Actually, your explanation is generating so many questions in my head, but I think we have to stick to what we have planned. So, which Indian or global mythology's work has influenced you the most?
See, in as far as global is concerned, it's always been Joseph Campbell, because I've read Joseph Campbell a lot, and I also teach Joseph Campbell a lot. So Joseph Campbell's concept of comparative, he's the one who introduced this whole idea of what we call comparative mythology. Now, when he uses the word comparative mythology, what he means is that irrespective of the culture, which I just explained, a while ago, irrespective of the culture, every man, wherever he was, had similar concerns and thoughts. So if Indians were worried about the idea ki, where did I come from, then
Mm.
we have a whole lot of creation myths. What we call is how the earth got created, how man got created, how the animals got created. You will realize that this concept is not unique to Indians. It was unique to every human being in any part of the world. So creation myth is found in every culture, including, as I said, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Mayans, the Chinese, name them. So these kind of concepts are common. it's not that, okay, maybe Indians might have had three creation myths, the Greeks might have had different creation myths, but creation ka jo problem hai, that was solved by every culture. So Joseph Campbell, of course, has been somebody I've read a lot. To be very honest, which is a surprise, that in India we do not have a mythologist, theorist who has come up with any theory of mythology, which is very strange because our mythology has been so rich. Our mythology is so diverse. We've got epics, we've got everything. But unfortunately, we've not had too many people who have come up with any theory. However, the two people who I think have contributed is a gentleman called Dr. Dange, Sadashiv Dange, who has been instrumental in starting this course at University of Mumbai, and of course somebody who's worked extensively. And the other gentleman even before was D.D. Kosambi. Now, D.D. Kosambi is known less for his mythology and more for other things, but Kosambi himself has come up with some wonderful theory. But again, as I said, they are not really mythologists, but they worked extensively on mythology as a subject.
Sir, I think you will agree at not at your school level or not even at my school level, we were taught mythology. So,
Okay.
what do you think? What is the role of mythology at school level education in current era?
I personally feel, see, what is happening is that many of us who've probably studied in English medium school have been exposed to Greek mythology, through our English literature, through Shakespeare classes. We've all been introduced to Greek mythology. But in our country, our own epics are not taught.
Mm.
The reason why our own epics are not taught is because our epics have been converted into religious texts. Now, in our country, schools have to be secular. Now, because they are secular, they are unable to teach, let's say, a religious text. Number one.
Mm.
Now, for example, if I see Ramayana and Mahabharata as epics, right?
Mm.
And if a child in the school asks the teacher who's teaching epics, is Ram a god? Then the teacher has a problem in explaining this answer. Is Ram a god? Or is he the hero of an epic written by Rishi Valmiki?
Yes.
This is a problem. In the process, because we are not able to handle this, or because we are not handling this, whichever way you want to look at it, our children are deprived of these two great texts called Ramayana and Mahabharata, or any other mythology per se. But Greek, they know, right? Our children know everything about Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. They know about Percy Jackson, but our children know nothing. And if you tell them to study Ramayana and Mahabharata, then our children probably think कि our parents are telling us to read religious books. हमें अभी religious books नहीं पढ़ना है. So what is important is that make these two texts non-religious. Let them study them as epics, as a part of our heritage literature. This is literature, right? We'll have to teach our children. This is part of literature. They need to read it. But that environment is missing at this stage. I personally feel our epics should be taught in schools, but as epics, the way they would have studied Iliad or Odyssey or any other epics is how we should teach them, and teach it as part of literature, not as a part of religious texts. Then it is worth doing it.
So I think, according to you, before we teach our students, I think we need to teach our teachers how to how to see mythology and how to handle mythological questions.
Education department has to come up with a very clear way of teaching this, not teaching this as a religious text. If you do that, then we are doing justice to this wonderful epics for which research is on even today. There are international people studying Mahabharata. Some of them have done such extensive work on Mahabharata. Yes, they need to be taught to our children also, and not just through television serials. They are not the right medium of teaching our children our epics.
Right. So the interpretation of mythology changes over time.
Right.
Right. But do we ever get a totally new mythological stories? Say, for example, we will be devoid of Mahabharata and Iliad, and something more epic or become more popular in the future. Do we have that kind of probability?
I think this possibility of that is less. And I'll tell you why. What is happening is that we have been reading or we have been hearing about our epics for thousands of years now, right? So, there's a standard thing that A.K. Ramanujan had once said. In India, nobody reads Ramayana. People know Ramayana. You see,
Right.
we just know it.
Mhm.
Padta kaun hai? We just know it. That's the
Yes.
beauty of these texts. These texts have stayed with us despite numerous versions.
Right.
I on my own teach at least 17 or 16 to 17 versions of Ramayana. And there are still about another 100 which I have, which one can't even touch or one can't even finish. With so many
Right.
versions, in different regions, in South you have one version, in Bengal you have another region, the tribals have their own version, etc., etc. The story has still stayed with us. That's the
Mhm.
beauty of this kind of an epic. Why? Because from oral, right from the time it was oral text to the time it got written to the time it got interpreted over centuries, right? The story has not really been dead for us. It has stayed on, and I think it will stay on. Maybe the newer generation will hear in a different format, but the stories will stay. Now, new. What about the new stories? The new stories are not. We just can't retain them. I mean, what did I
Mm.
read in fiction 4 years back? I barely remember.
Right.
Unless somebody reminds me saying, "You remember that?" So our attention span and everything is being written down now. You see,
Mm.
so unless the literature has the ability to hold on, okay, I don't think it will stay. These epics are there to stay because it has its own richness. It is content rich. I mean, Mahabharat, every time you read Mahabharat, simple example, every time you read Mahabharat, you'll realize, oh, I missed this point last time. What about
Right.
this? You sit in a common discussion with 10 people, and if you start discussing Mahabharat, you will not know where your time went, and you realize that instead of solving any problem, it's created 10 more questions for you. That's the
Yes.
beauty of this kind of epics. You see, they cannot die. They will remain no matter what. And new interpretations are coming up. I see a lot of theater,
Yes.
even abroad, they are also experimenting. They're reinventing, they're reimagining, they are redoing, they're revisioning, as we call it, their own mythology. So this will stay, this won't die, and I wish they don't.
Right. Sir, is it really easy to handle 16 or 17 versions of Ramayana and teaching them together?
No, it's easy when you see the difference. See, when we say these kind of things, is that from an academic perspective, it's very, very interesting, when you understand, and when you say that this is a different version, and this version they've shown this. It's very interesting. No, I don't find it tough. Rather, as I said, during the lockdown, I have done so many of these sessions. Of every time, I have to tell my clients, can we do something else? He says, no, no, we want to do one version of Ramayana. So I'm like, there is so much more in other myths, but there is no end to it. And I'll tell you, they are so interesting that
Right.
every time you do, you realize, that, or other people realize that ye to hame pata hi nahi tha, and
Mm.
that's the beauty of it. There are so many versions, and yeah, so much research is still on this kind of work.
Right. So as you mentioned earlier that mythology has to be uh, taught in a way that it is different from the religious text.
Hmm.
Does mythology provide any solution to the communal conflicts we have in our country like India?
If you can separate mythology with religion, then there won't be a problem, right?
Okay.
The problem is, look at a simple example. If you go to Greece, okay, you stand in the middle of Athens and you say something negative about Zeus,
Mm.
nobody will bother. Nobody will even
Mm.
look at you. They'll probably look at you, they'll smile, they'll leave. But in our country, if you stand in a small place and talk about some obscure god, I'm not even talking about Ram and Krishna here, some obscure god, trust me, you won't go back home. People will lynch you in the middle of the street, right? Why has this happened? Because our mythology has become our religion. The
Mm.
Greek mythology or the Egyptian mythology did not really become their religion. It remained in the realm of storytelling. It remained in the realm of heritage. It remained in the realm of literature. But what has happened in our case is that we have made our mythology our religion. We have made our mythical characters as our gods. So, at the drop of a hat, we can create communal riots. Create.
Right.
I'm not saying they will happen. Riots never happen. Riots are always created. And they're so easy, especially in the present scenario where, it's like touch me not. Remember the very fact that we've had this, as one of the scholars has said, that there are 300 versions of Ramayana. 300. How did they happen? Because the earlier time, people used to allow discussions, debates, and dialogues. The
Mm.
day you stop this debate and dialogue and discussion, that's the death of a text. That's the
Mm.
death of, to keep the text alive, to keep the discussion on, to make it lively. You will have to allow a debate or discussion, and in some debate, somebody will disagree with you, which is
Right.
fine. Will that lower the stature of the epic? If I say, okay, I've read Ramayana, मुझे तो story अच्छी नहीं लगी,
Mm.
what will happen? You tell me. Will Ramayan's position fall 10 notches down? But
Mm.
see, today to make that statement itself is so life-threatening. You see, the day you do this, it's the biggest disservice to this brilliant literature, piece of literature that was written for people like us. We're still talking. After so many thousands of years, we are still discussing this. That's the richness. How can one man's opinion change it is beyond me. So communal riots, if you can separate your mythology with your religion and separate that, there'll be no communal riot. Oh, less chances. I won't say there will be no, there'll be less.
Sir, your explanation gives me hope as well as fear. Why?
Mm,
A fear because when you disagree with something, as you rightly mentioned, when you disagree with particularly religious texts, then there are chances of you are under threat. And the hope
yes.
that when you agree, or when you can accommodate certain different worldview, there are chances that you can lower down your ego and be comfortable with the fluid world, isn't it?
I agree with you. I agree with you. Completely agree. It's both a risk. I completely agree that there is fear. There's no doubt about it. There is fear. So what we used to say, let's say 5 or 6 years back, today we have to be careful. We have to uh, be very careful in the kind of words that we use. Okay, I mean, I'll give a simple example. 6 years back or 7 years back, my same students who attend my classes were very open to ideas. But right now, I do find certain students who are still not willing to adjust, despite the fact that they've come to study mythology and they are all grown up, right? They're 35 plus. Generally, the crowd of a mythology class is all 35 to above. They all come to understand what is myths or mythology. But we do find certain people who kind of get stuck on their views, not willing to change. So times have changed. Definitely, it has changed. So it's a risk. But yeah, some of us continue doing what we have been doing.
So out of many mythological stories, which is the one story which is very close to your heart, which you revise, or which you can revisit again and again to get motivation or inspiration or get back to the life?
Well, for me, the story of the story of Ahalya and Rishi Gautam has been a very, very interesting story. I will say it's interesting because I have read so many interpretations, and what I find beautiful about it is that today people are willing to look at it in a different way. You see, time and again, we have been like, when I heard the story for the first time, the story went. The title of the story was "The Transgression of Ahalya."
Mm.
Transgression, okay?
Right.
Ahalya ka paap. The
Ah.
story is Ahalya ka paap, or the transgression. You see, we've reached a stage where we wonder that, and I have interpreted also the story in my first novel in a very different way to say that was it really transgression? We are only looking at it from Rishi Gautam's perspective. We are not looking at it from two important people's perspective. One is Indra himself, and the other
Yes.
is Ahalya. Two young people, in absolute youth. And here is an old man, Rishi Gautam, okay, who is married to a girl who is fit to be his daughter, right? With no joys, no passion in life, no joys of life. And here is Indra, who's the god of the gods, one of the most handsome gods. Isn't it natural that Ahalya, for a moment, would be attracted to Indra? The question is that, of course, we don't take, in mythology, we never take things in absolute terms. There is always something in relative terms. And I find that this story has been written and rewritten so many times in so many different forms. And in the 60s and 50s in South India, there have been very beautiful and revolutionary, or if I can use the word radical, plays being enacted on stage in public view, where they say that Ahalya and Indra did not make a mistake, right? Also, many versions say that it was the rape of Ahalya by Indra. Even that is incorrect. You see how, there is always this popular view which needs to be imposed. Okay, and over time, the story has been imposed on us in a very popular way to say that think like this. And I think what has happened is we've all been put blinkers, saying ऐसे ही देखनी है ये story को. I think those
Right.
blinkers are not being removed. And I have extensively researched on the Ahalya story. And in my first novel, Shakuntala, I've actually put there to see that let people understand the background. See, we tell a story. Here's an old man. Here's his wife. Here's Indra. This is what happened. The woman was punished because it was transgression, and the man was punished because what he did was incorrect. But every story has a backstory. We need to go
Yes.
back and understand how did these two get together? How did an old man, Rishi Gautam, get married to a girl who is, as young as his daughter? How did this happen? When you go to the genesis of that, when you go to that story, you'll realize no, it probably wasn't a mistake. But the storyteller, the one who's probably written the story, is trying to give a message. That message is important. And Valmiki, where we first read this story, did not say that Ahalya did not recognize Indra. You see how the story has changed. Later
Yes.
versions tell us that Indra came in the disguise of Rishi Gautam. But
Yes.
when Valmiki said this story, he did not say that Indra came in the form of Rishi Gautam. Indra came as Indra, and Ahalya knew who he was. What does that
Right.
mean? And Valmiki has not made a comment on this. So you see how the stories change. And what really interests me is this changing of the story over a period of time. So I try and trace when did the story first undergo a change? When did the story get a value judgment to it by saying ye to guna hai? You see, when Valmiki, the original storyteller, did not find it guna, who found it? Who used the word transgression for the first time? So those kind of things, I find it very, very interesting. It's a lovely story, which I think it's time to be retold once again in a more practical, more believable form of a story.
I think, sir, we mostly preach. I mean, most of us really preach that we should go into the depth of the matter, and the way
Yes.
you are explaining depth of this story, I think it makes me fascinating about all the depth mythology have, and
Oh, it,
particularly, I just you mentioned, I was also. I was also aware only of this version that he came as in a disguised form of Rishi Gautam, and
right.
then she was stoned. Then Lord Rama came, and then there was a liberation of Ahalya, such kind of thing. So at that age, when I was in school time, it was very difficult to understand what they are talking about. I mean, what is the real message? And after going through many, not only evolving with age, but after reading many mythological versions now, I can clearly say you need to go into the depths to understand, to broaden your mind. And that is what which is needed, in my opinion, in the current age, the
Yes.
broader perspective.
And when was this story written and who had written it? See, that is very
Yeah.
important. When was this story written and what was the objective of the author? That is very important. We miss out on that point, right? This particular version written in 16th century, what was the structure of society in the 16th century? What was the
Mm.
structure of the society when Valmiki wrote a story? And what is the structure of the society when Tulsidas wrote his Ramcharitmanas? There's a gap of close to, if I'm not mistaken, about 8 to 900 or more years from the
Mm.
time that Valmiki wrote the story, more actually. And by the time in the 16th century, sorry, not so he wrote it in 16th century. So there's about I would say 1700 years. You see how the society has changed. If you just read Valmiki's version of Ramayana and you read Tulsidas's version of Ramayana, you will see Ramayana itself having such massive changes, and that will tell you how the society thought or how the society was. And I think that's the beauty of these different versions when we read
So, sir, my next question is really interesting one. You know, once you go into mythology, it is an ocean. So
it. Right.
you find it really interesting, superb. I mean, you have every day you have a new interpretation. But over the period of time, does mythology gets one bored from the reality we have, or does it have potential to liberate you from all the limited worldview of mind we have?
Oh, for me, mythology has been very, very liberating. For me, I think I find new things in mythology, and I find a lot of interesting bits in mythology, which probably has eluded us for so long a time. So when you read myths, when you read the cultural, when you read the stories, you will realize that probably we were much more evolved, much more civilized, much more open in our thought process than what we are today.
Yes.
Unfortunately, what has happened is we are the people who gave the world Mahabharata, which has every conceivable, what we call today, sin as
Mm.
possible thing. There's a
Mm.
woman, we have premarital child, then there are
Yes.
premarital sex, and there are too many partners, and many other things, right?
Mm.
Which today is considered to be bad. But Mahabharata passes it off casually. Nobody's
Mm.
bothered. We are the same people who've written books like the Kama Sutra. We are the same
Mm.
people who've written books on architecture. We are the same people
Mm.
who've written the Vedas. We have the same people Purans. We have everything. But
Mm.
look what the Britishers did. The Britishers, before they left, they turned us into prudes, that we don't even want to use the three-letter word sex, which was there in
Mm.
our books, which was there in
Mm.
our temples. Our temple
Yes.
architecture has, unmentionables as per the modern times. So see,
Yes.
what is happening is that we have made sure that some things are not to be spoken, some things are
Mm.
not to be said, when our forefathers used to speak it very openly, when our
Right.
forefathers used to debate and discuss and paint it on temple walls. आपको जिस
Right.
बारे में बात नहीं करनी है, those are
Mm.
painted on temple walls. The question is,
Right.
the society must be so open. I'll give another example. Geet Govind, I don't know when it was written, but around 13th to 14th century. If you
Mm.
read Geet Govind, if you will realize that there is so much of erotica in it, and
Mm.
these poems, these songs were sung in the king's court by
Right.
Jayadev, who wrote them with complete passion and devotion to Lord Krishna. And
Right.
when he was reciting these poems, there was a section of the women from the king's side who would all listen, and these were openly recited, openly read. Today we have associated the word erotica with Jayadev's Geet Govind, which were nothing but religious, passionate documents. But
Mm.
you won't buy an English version of Jayadev and keep it at home if you have a young boy or a girl at home. See what we've done to
Right.
ourselves. It is a
Right.
religious, it is devotional text, but the devotion was seen in a very human form. where the basic between the relationship between Krishna and Radha has been seen in a very human form. And the passion is completely overbearing. Now look what we are doing. We can't even talk about these things, right? We don't want to talk about so many things. Why? Because we feel that अरे नहीं नहीं, this family अंदर घर के अंदर ये सब बात नहीं करते, चलो बाहर जाके करते. And that is why our children are probably spending more time looking for the wrong kind of things on the internet, because the parents and the families not able to discuss this subject openly, which our forefathers did, which were there on the temple walls, which were there on texts, which were there. You go and watch any temple, even if it all the images are so suggestive. उस टाइम लोग बिगड़ते नहीं थे क्या? So you see, I personally feel that हम अब बिगड़ गए हैं. We were very open, we were very progressive. I think we become more regressive now, and I think over time we are getting more and more regressive. We just need to let ourselves loose and accept that our ancient times were really good. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's no need to be ashamed of our heritage, which was rich, which was very, very rich in terms of texts, architecture, knowledge, everything. And I think that's what mythology helps us unravel, understand. For me, it's extremely liberating when I read all these texts and I realize that if they could discuss it in those days when we think people were not civilized, what's happened to us? Why can't you and I discuss this openly?
Sir, I have to admit, even for me, mythology is liberating. In actual sense, 6 to 7 years ago, when I started reading mythology, all the doubts and all the queries I had in my mind, particularly about the gods and goddesses, solved. And even I'm really happy that since last 10 years or so, there is so much of mythology is being popularized, particularly reinterpreted, and at the school level or for the kids literature, they are available. And sir, if we go by realistic expectation, how many years it will take more to come out of the grip of this Britishers who labeled these things as a unholy or say impure?
See, the Britishers might have labeled it unholy or impure or dirty, but the Britishers have gone 73 years back, right? What have we done? Have we done anything to open it up? We are also trying to cover it up. We are also trying to, but we are covering it up in a different way. We want to look at only those things which suits us, right? I will tell my child the story of Mahabharata, but I will edit certain parts while I progress, right? Why? Because I can't handle a sticky question. अगर कुछ पूछा उसने तो मैं क्या बोलूंगा? आप अपने आप को equip, and that is why what we are doing is we are still continuing the sanitized versions of all the stories. You see, so Britishers ko we can blame. Yes, the education system is still running on British format, but then the education ministers have been Indians for so long. What have we done? We are not doing anything. So yes, I think beyond a point, I think beyond 20, 30, 40 years, we should stop blaming others. It's time to take the blame on ourselves. Have we done anything? Have we introduced our own stories to our children? Are we willing to show them the right version of the story? Are we willing to discuss, ye story mein ye garbad hai, but that's the fiction part of it, or that's the social part of it. Are we equipped to tell our children that do not judge this story on just this one incident, because the story is rich otherwise? First and foremost, let's understand that these are part of literature. Are we introducing them as literature? See, moment we introduce as religious text, then there is no questions to be asked. Ye aise hi hai, don't ask a question. That's what our religion has become today. Do not question the religion. But remember, these texts have been questioned and questioned. That's why there are so many versions. Why do we have so many versions? Because people are allowing debates and discussion. Moment you stop debate and discussion, then so God does galat, God does right, wrong. God can do, you cannot. Now, moment you do this, the child stops believing, saying, what kind of a world is this? No, he's not relating to it. You're not able to handle this. That's why I said before it's taught in school, our teachers will have to be equipped to handle how to answer the question, madam, did this happen? Is this history or is this literature? We
Hmm.
first need to educate our teachers or equip them how to handle this without the parents coming running to the teacher to, आपने कल क्या बोला था मेरे बच्चे को? The teacher will not teach. He'll say, sorry, I'm not teaching this subject. That's the problem. That's the problem.
True that, sir. True that. That is a really liberating one. So your answers give show me that there is opportunity and there is a challenges.
It is. It
Challenges
is.
in the sense that we have yet to open our mind to certain level which we were used to open in our past days, and opportunity in the sense that just like now we have more people who are interested into mythology, same way more people who are interested into reading books, although readership has gone down, but people are open for debate discussion.
True.
Maybe that will take a different form through
Sure.
videos and through public debates. So this there is an opportunity. So I think it's a great combination this mythology subject is, and
It
I'm
is.
really fascinated by mythology, and I don't want this interaction of ours to end any sooner.
Sure. Anytime.
Sir, so you have written three books:
Hmm.
Sakuntala, the woman who wronged, Satyavati, and Kannaki's anklet. Now, this all three are, in my knowledge, they are rare stories. I mean, which is not so much popular. So,
Hmm.
are you actively looking for the stories which are not that popular and to make it popular so that the most of the readers get a broader perspective, or is just a coincidence?
No, no, no. It is an objective. Like, for example, Shakuntala is, everybody knows Shakuntala as Kalidas's Shakuntala, right?
Hmm.
When I started working on this, not many people actually knew that Shakuntala is actually a character from Mahabharata. And
Hmm.
like all Vyasa's characters, Shakuntala was an extremely powerful and a strong individual woman. But time and
Hmm.
again, when we talk of Shakuntala, we think of a helpless girl who was promised, who lost the ring, and poor girl,
Hmm.
she was always. That's not the image of Shakuntala. Shakuntala, as Vyasa's character, was extremely strong, individual, and she was seldom shown crying in that version. So when I read, Vyasa's version of Shakuntala, I was very impressed, and I realized that majority of the people that I spoke to, including my publisher, everybody thought that Shakuntala was the creation of Kalidas. But
Hmm.
Shakuntala was not
Yes.
the creation of Kalidas. Rather, Kalidas took the story from Mahabharata but changed it drastically. I wanted to tell the story the way Vyas had said. That's why I wrote that story, following much, of course, much the Mahabharata part. Okay, though I've added some parts from my own. So that was my objective of telling the original Shakuntala story. As far
Right.
as Satyavati is concerned, what has happened is that time and again, not many people feel that Satyavati had any role to play in Mahabharata. Now,
Hmm.
when I teach mythology, a lot of people ask me, why are there only male heroes? How come there are no female heroes in mythology? Now, that's a question which is at the root of a lot of my books, is that there are female heroes, but they are not heroes the way you will measure a man. For example,
Hmm.
a male hero will fight battles. He will kill a dragon. Okay, he will kill some creature. He will go and kill a Ravan. He will kill a Rakshas. Females don't have to prove their heroism by again doing the same thing, because that's how we judge men. We don't have to
Yes.
judge women in the same way. So a woman's
Hmm.
heroism could be without fighting a battle. And
Yes.
Satyavati had a very, very important role to play in Mahabharata. But you see, whichever version you read of Mahabharata, it is dominated by men.
But
Right
men.
from the time
Yes.
of Shantanu, Bhishma, then the
Hmm.
Pandavas, then the Kauravas, then Krishna, the women hardly get a role to play except in
Right.
bouts. But Satyavati had a very, very important role to play right from the beginning when she entered till she was there as
Hmm.
somebody who was actually ruling the kingdom
Hmm.
from behind the throne. And that is an interesting angle that that Satyavati had a role to play. But if you see B.R. Chopra's Mahabharat, Satyavati is standing in one corner of the screen wearing a white
Yes.
sari all her life. No, there is
Yes.
much more to Satyavati, in my opinion, which is why I felt that I should write this story. And Kannaki's anklet was a surprise revelation for me when I realized that here is one epic which doesn't find mention in our Indian literature except in Tamil Nadu. So if you ask anybody in the country which are the epics, you will say people will say Ramayana Mahabharata. But there is
Hmm.
another epic which was written in Tamil, which is known as Shilapatikaram. Now, it's
Hmm.
such a brilliant epic in the sense that this is one epic which rests on the shoulder of a woman from starting to end.
Okay.
And we never have an epic. There isn't any other epic that I know of where the main protagonist is a woman and she doesn't
Okay.
fight a battle. She doesn't do any killing of dragons and all, but she's the hero of this. And nobody beyond, the South knows about this. So when I first read the story, I was so impressed by it that I decided, and there were no simple, how should I put it, simple translations of this particular epic, and that's why I found, I felt that I should rewrite it in a simple form so that more and more people, other than Tamil Nadu and maybe a part of Kerala, who know this character. So that's why I wrote Kannaki's anklet. It's a very good, interesting story about a woman who, and importantly written by a Jain monk. You see, writing about marriage, love, romance by a Jain monk is another interesting angle. That how does a Jain monk
Yes.
write? But it's so brilliantly written that depicting the entire Tamil culture at that point of time and how inclusive the culture was, where we can see Hindus, Jains, and Buddhists coexisting in a world without any, problems. So I think
Okay.
it's a brilliant part of Sangam literature, as we call it, which I thought, and that's why I wrote it in simple English, so that more and more people should read this story.
So when I was preparing for our today's session, I have gone through all three books of yours. I mean, I haven't completely read it, but
Of
when
course.
I read the names, Sakuntala, and I read the explanation which you have provided right now in one of your talks, and then the Satyavati, that immediately attracted me because she was mother of Vyas,
Right,
the person who has written the Mahabharata. She was
right.
mother of that person, and still we hardly know anything about her. And that
Yes,
really attracts me, that I want to read this book. Then I
please do.
then I there is one app, Readify
Yes,
com.
yes. Do this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I downloaded that app. I bought the book, but somehow since last 7 days I am not able to open the book because the app is keep crashing on. But let me tell you, I'm really interested to read this book, and I'm going to read it and share this thing in our book club also. So
please do.
thank you
But the
very
book
much
is now,
for giving such rare stories to us, particularly people who are more interested in mythology and who get bored easily by the one version of the story. We need more versions to make life lucid.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Sir, one last question in this round. What are your next projects you are working on?
So I have one more book which should be coming out sometime next year, and so that's a book on Lord Indra. Now, Indra has been a much, how do I put it, much maligned god
Yes.
in our, we've always used Indra for all the wrong purposes. He's the most
Yes.
insecure god.
Yes.
The only job that he does is जब भी कोई ऋषि तप करता है, तो his job is to send an apsara. But that's what kind of that's the image of Indra. But remember the
Hmm.
fact that Indra was the number one god or the main god during the Vedic times. So in the
Right.
Vedas, there is a lot of mention of Indra and his glory and his uh, battles and his pursuits. So what happened from somebody being the main god, number one god, to somebody who during the Purans, by the time we have Puranic literature coming up with Krishna and all, as being established, what happened that this god was reduced to a caricature? We have
Right.
a very famous episode of the Govardhan Parvat,
Yeah.
where Krishna lifts the Govardhan Parvat and we have a scene where Indra is on his knees, okay, begging forgiveness to Krishna, and that to a child Krishna, not the Lord Krishna, the child Krishna. So that's what. So my novel. Basically, when I write a book, I try to bring a theory which is in existence. But if I tell you the theory gets very boring, right? So what I
Right.
try to do is I try to put that principle which is in existence through the novel. So my story actually talks of the rise and the fall of Lord Indra. What happened that during the later period, by the time when we started having new gods in the Puranic literature like Krishna, Shiva, those gods, what happened to the Vedic gods, and especially what happened to Agni, what happened to Indra, what happened to Varuna, what happened to Ashwins? These gods have all receded, though they have not been made fun of, but Indra continues to be made fun of in all the Puranic literature. So, with the rise of Krishna, we find the fall of Indra. So, this book traces and explains the logic, and of course, in a novel format, to say that why did Indra have to go through this? And it's like the rise of one hero at the cost of another hero. That's the logic here. But then there are theories which I've explained in the book, again in the form of a novel. So that should hit the stand sometime next year.
This is so fascinating, sir. As I have read many versions where mainly Indra is seen as a villain, or one should not be like Indra, and
Right.
even you will not find any temples of Indra. So there is a one thing where your mind gets stuck. But we need more versions, or more different versions of where Indra can be seen from different point of view. Why he was
Yes.
considered God of gods. So I am
Correct.
really looking forward for this book. So now we have one round, which is a rapid fire round. So I'll
Okay.
ask you a question. You won't have any time to think over it. You need to just speak it, whatever comes to your mind.
I'll try.
Yeah. So, speaking or writing about mythology, what you enjoy more and why?
Speaking. I have a direct interaction with audience when I speak, so I enjoy speaking.
So, your favorite genre other than mythology?
Folk tales. I love to read folk tales a lot, and maybe detective and suspense, which I don't get time to read nowadays. But I like reading folk tales.
So, the modern day retelling of epic, which you like the most?
I don't read much of fiction nowadays, but yes, if I have to say, then I will say Chitra Banerjee Devakaruni's Palace of Illusions.
Palace of
That's
Illusion. Right.
really written well, I think.
Hmm. So, with whom your work you can relate better, Devdutt Patnaik or Amish Tripathi?
Neither.
Right. So, the original version, Jaya, and the latest version by Anand Nilakantan, Ajaya, which one would you prefer and why?
Well, I'm a great friend of Anand, so I think the two of us get along well. I will probably read Anand's book Ajaya.
Right.
Why? Because he's a contrarian and gives me a view to how he how the contrarian part of literature works. So that's why I enjoy reading. I even interact with him a lot. So yeah, I enjoy that.
So I cannot tell you how much I am enjoying this session. I don't want to it end, but at the same time, I want you to publish this book Indra as soon as possible. I want to read this book Satyavati, and we
Sure.
look forward to have you again on our show. Maybe we can meet physically once the corona is over. When you,
Absolutely.
I think you come every time on Ahmedabad International Literature Festival.
Ahmedabad Literature Festival also, and and I there was a program that was organized by, I don't know if you know her, Ketki Modi. She was organizing a program which got cancelled. Otherwise, I was going to be there, and after that, one
Sir,
has never.
I was the host of that program.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Unity in diversity, right?
Yeah, unity
Oh,
in diversity. Yes.
okay, okay. It's a small world. So I was going to
Yes.
be speaking out there. in March, but then
Right.
last moment we had to cancel
Last.
off
Yes.
everything. Anyway,
Yes.
we're still hoping that will happen sometime, and I'm really looking forward to that event again, as and when it happens.
Thank you very much, sir. It was an enriching session. I mean, so many new learning, so many, mind opened up to so many possibilities that what one can do with this world, and what this world can become in a better way if we just open our mind, and how juicy the mythological stories are. And we
Absolutely.
thoroughly enjoyed this session. And thank you very much for giving your time. And we look forward to have you again in our book show, as well as in physical meeting someday. And
Sure.
thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you to you and your entire team and Dr. John for having me here. And feel free whenever I'm in Ahmedabad, I'll definitely come and see you guys over. And let's keep in touch. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching this session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope all of you have really enjoyed this session, and this session is going to be recorded on our Facebook page and even YouTube. So you may revisit it again and again to find, not only find the answers of question, but to find the links where you can find, where you want to go. Let's say, for example, if you are not convey, or you are not comfortable with the answers what Mr. Patel has given, he has also given you the name of the books or stories which you can go and refer and find your own myth or find your own truth. So that is the beauty of this session. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and we will meet again next Sunday with new author, with new session. Till then, give us permission to find our own myth. As Joseph Campbell rightly said, myths are the public dreams, and dreams are the private myths. Thank you very
True.
much. Myself, Dr. Samir, founder of Books and Bliss Club. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye.